Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and for the sixth time this year, the Demons fell agonisingly short at the final hurdle and are left to ponder what might have been. Joining me tonight to discuss the beginning of a new era at Demonland is Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Demonland Massive. A new era that'll last, is this the Chaplin era?
Yeah.
What do they call it? What's the name between two civilizations or whatever that's called, the anti. It'll come to me at some point. But yeah, we're in the short-lived Chaplin era between civilizations, between the Goodwin era and the Buckley era.
Well, it might not be. Could be somebody else. We'll have to wait and see, and we're going to unpack a bit of that shortly. I'll just get into some housekeeping, and then we can get on to the big news of the week. And once again, there was no feedback left for us, so come on, Demonlanders, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps boost the show, and we really appreciate the feedback. And as a token of our appreciation, we do give you a shout out on the show. Make sure to give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You can download and listen to the Demonland podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. You can also watch and listen to us on YouTube. And if you want to connect with other Demon fans and discuss everything that's going on at Demonland, head on over to Demonland, sign up and join in the conversation with fellow D supporter from across Australia and around the world. It's completely free. And if you want to call into the show live, head on over to demonland.com, hit the call button. It's going to take you to a Microsoft Teams link in your browser. You don't need to download any software. I'll answer your call and bring you on when there's a break in the conversation. And if you want to listen to the show live, head on over to demonland.com on Monday nights at 8 p.m. So let's get straight into the big news that dropped the day after our show last week. Following our 86-point thrashing of West Coast last week, a bombshell was dropped on Tuesday morning with the news that drought-breaking premiership coach Simon Goodwin was sacked by the MFC board, led by interim president Brad Green. Goodwin first made his name as a player with the Adelaide Crows, debuting in 1997 and immediately becoming a part of back-to-back premiership teams in 1997 and 1998. Over a 275-game career, he developed a reputation as one of the AFL's premier midfielders, earning 5 All-Australian selections, 3 Club Best and Fairest awards, and serving as Adelaide captain from 2008 until his retirement in 2010. He was inducted into the Australian Football Hall of Fame in 2017, a reflection of his enduring impact on the game. And immediately after hanging up the boots, Goodwin moved into coaching, joining Essendon as an assistant in 2010. He took the reins for the Bombers' final game of the 2013 season during the fallout of the supplement saga and was promoted to senior assistant in 2014. Later that year, Melbourne signed him on a 5-year deal under a succession plan with Paul Roos. Goodwin served 2 seasons as Roos's understudy before taking over as senior coach in 2017. In his first year as coach, the Demons fell agonisingly short of making the finals, missing out on a spot in the top 8 by just 0.5%. The next year, the Demons returned to finals after a 12-year hiatus and stormed their way into a preliminary final. The defining chapter of his coaching career came in 2021. Under Goodwin's leadership, Melbourne rose to the top of the competition, finishing the home and away season as minor premiers and powering through the finals to claim their first VFL/AFL premiership in 57 years. The Demons' emphatic grand final victory over the Western Bulldogs was hailed as a masterclass in coaching and preparation, cementing Goodwin's place in Melbourne's history. That year, he was named both AFL Coaching Association's Coach of the Year and the All-Australian Coach. But in the seasons that followed, the fairy tale began to fray. Despite fielding a strong list, Melbourne failed to win a single final after 2021, exiting September in straight sets in both 2022 and 2023. The 2024 season ended without a finals berth, and by mid-2025, the Demons were languishing in 12th place out of contention. Off-field turbulence, questions over the team's game style, and a growing sense within the club hierarchy that a new voice was needed set the stage for change. On Monday, the 4th of August 2025, Melbourne informed Goodwin that his tenure was over with immediate effect. The announcement was made public the next morning, first leaked to or via the press, and then by a letter to the members from President Brad Green. The club offered him the opportunity to coach out the season, but he declined, stating that Melbourne needed clear air to reset. Troy Chaplin, then serving as an assistant, was appointed caretaker for the remainder of the year. The decision marked the end of an 11-year association with Melbourne, 2 as an assistant, 9 as senior coach, and of course that included being the main architect of a drought-breaking flag. In explaining the move, the club emphasised the need to regain competitive edge and set a new direction while acknowledging Goodwin's enormous contribution to on-field success, culminating in reaching the highest pinnacle of the sport. The search for his replacement began almost immediately. The board has stated it wants the new coach in place before the 2025 Grand Final to provide stability ahead of the trade period and pre-season. While Chaplin has indicated he will not pursue the role, several high-profile names have already been linked. Nathan Buckley has publicly described the job as quite compelling, and he's open to discussions, with many pundits claiming it is his job to lose. Adam Simpson and John Longmire, however, have both ruled themselves out, with Simpson saying he's not yet ready to return to senior coaching and Longmire confirming he will not be in the mix for 2026. There are a plethora of highly touted assistants in the mix that could potentially fill the role. It was announced over the weekend that there would be a boardroom meeting taking place tonight, Monday the 11th of August, in which a panel would be put together to officially begin the search for a new coach. And before I get into some questions about our thoughts on the sacking and the potential replacement and any other changes within the footy department, I just want to add a few words of thanks to our premiership coach. Some of you may have read what I wrote about Goody on Demonland, thanking him for everything that he achieved as a coach. I basically said that as Demons fans, we've ridden a roller coaster of emotions over the decades, the heartbreaks, the near misses, the wooden spoons, the endless waiting. But through it all, we've clung to hope. And Simon Goodwin arrived at Melbourne during one of those rare moments when hope felt real again. And after decades of false dawns, his arrival alongside Paul Roos brought a renewed sense of belief. Something was beginning to stir. Under his watch, we began to see what was possible. He brought defensive grit, relentless attack, and an uncompromising demand for effort. He taught this proud but battered club to fight again. In those early years, he led us back to September after so long in the football wilderness. For the first time in years, we started to believe again. And then came 2021. It was almost impossible to find the words to capture what that year meant to all of us. In the darkest days of lockdowns and isolation, he led us to the light. He took a group of talented but unproven players and turned them into a ruthless, relentless machine. He dared them to dream, and he made us believe again. And then, on a September night in Perth, he delivered us the moment we'd waited 57 long years for. A premiership, a demolition, a masterpiece, a drought breaker. Simon Goodwin did what so many before him could not. He gave generations of Demon fans something to hold on to. And for those who waited their whole lives, for the ones who didn't believe they would ever live to see it, for the kids who would now know what glory feels like, he made that happen. But footy is brutal. The expectations rise, the pressure mounts, and the same man who brought us our greatest joy has now been shown the door. And it hurts. It's confusing for some. It feels wrong in some ways to discard someone who is now considered a legend of the club. But above all that, we are grateful for what he helped achieve for our club, grateful for the Premiership Cup that now stands in our cabinet. He etched his name into Melbourne Football Club history, not just as a coach, but as a redeemer. And there were lows, frustrating losses, finals, heartbreaks, questions that went unanswered, but no one can ever take away what he accomplished. He changed the course of our club forever. So thank you, Goody. Thank you for the belief. Thank you for the memories. Thank you for 2021. Thank you for giving us our time. You'll always be a part of the Melbourne family. You're forever a Demon. Now, Big Man, before I get your thoughts on everything that's transpired, I'll say, and I've been up front about this on the podcast for several weeks, I thought it was time for a fresh voice. I've always acknowledged how special the 2021 flag was and how impressive the 22 and 23 home and away seasons were, with us living in the top four. But the straight sets exits hurt. A few weeks back, I highlighted the win-loss record over the last 2 years, and those numbers speak for themselves compared to those 3 incredible seasons. 18 wins from 43 games since the start of 2024 and just 8 from the last 26. And those figures were very worrying. And even before the Saints game, I was all in on a reset. I believe I said it after the Carlton game. I just couldn't see improvement coming under the current coaching panel. I didn't want to see token off-season tinkering, swapping out an assistant or two and pretending that it might fix some deeper problems. And I'm grateful for everything Simon achieved. but gratitude can't hold us back from making some hard calls. And for me, that meant a new coach, possibly new coaching assistants, a shake-up in high performance, and possibly some tough list decisions to come at the end of the year. And part of that is now happening as we speak. A coach panel is being assembled to begin the search for our next senior coach. Will they go for an experienced leader or take a punt on a highly regarded assistant? There's no secret Nathan Buckley is front and centre and looks a strong chance to land the job. So, big man, I've hogged the mic long enough, but I'm going to hog it for a little bit more. I'll read out a few listener questions on this and share my own preferences, and then I'm going to hand it over to you. Singer writes, would love to get your thoughts on the sacking of Simon Goodwin last week and any potential replacement. Thoughts on Nathan Buckley as the favourite to coach the D's? Who else do you think will go or needs to go? Monocular says, looking forward to tonight's podcast, which no doubt will also include some speculation regarding our next coach. Troy Chaplin has said he is not in the running, but could another couple of spirited games like yesterday's change his mind? Spirit of Norm Smith says, can we have a few minutes discussion on the possibility of Nathan Buckley as our new coach for 2026 and beyond? Big man, your post on D Milan yesterday in another thread. I agree with many of your thoughts and misgivings, but also the many, many positives. Perhaps talk us through your post. I'd like to add that whilst Buckley has never tasted AFL Premiership glory, I think it makes him driven to succeed. He still has the hunger to drive himself. Whilst I hated him as a player, he has really great insights on SEN, and on the commentary, he has my vote. And Murdoch 516 says, if you're the GM, you're called to make on what happens with Richardson, Griffiths, Choco, Chaplin, Jones and Bassett at the end of the season. My dream was a complete revamp. However, I think the club needs some consistency. I'd axe Griffiths, Jones and Bassett, move Chaplin back as defensive line coach, headhunt the best midfield and forwards coach, Cam Bruce, Matthew Boyd, Brad Miller, Scott Burns, Scott Selwood, if it's possible. Dark Horse 72 says, I guess there'll be some discussions on the end of Goodwin. My question is the debate of where should we look, experience, i.e. Buckley, or a highly rated assistant with new ideas? So for me, I like the idea of Nathan Buckley, and despite his long-standing ties to the enemy, I've always admired him as a player and respected him as a coach. I've always enjoyed his work as an analyst on various radio and TV programs. His coaching record is solid, 53.7% win rate over 218 games in 9 years. And while many focus on the fact that he hasn't won a premiership and point to the poor track record of second club coaches winning flags, it's worth remembering that he was a single kick away from winning one. And yes, I see the irony of me banging on about our lack of ability to win the close ones. And for comparison, Simon Goodwin coached 203 games over 9 years for a 54.7% win rate, and that's 1% more. And the numbers are remarkably close. And some on D Milan said they don't like Buckley, calling him arrogant or simply unable to look past his affiliation with Collingwood. And that doesn't bother me. My priority is finding someone with proving coaching experience, some genuine clout and a strong media presence, someone respected in the industry who brings some gravitas to the role and helps us project ourselves as a destination club. We're crying out for the ability to attract and retain top players. And I believe Buckley would be a draw card, and if finances allow, he could also bring in high-quality assistants and football staff, an area where we badly need fresh voices. None of that does, I understand, guarantee success, but I believe our list is in good shape across all age brackets. We're not in rebuild mode. We do need a reset, and could that be achieved with the highly touted assistant stepping up? And possibly. Premiership coaches are often first-timers, but there's also a long list of coaches who never win a flag because, as we know, flags are bloody hard to win. So any coaching appointment carries risks, whether they're experienced or not. And I just like the idea of bringing in someone with a bit of presence, some marketability, and the pulling power to attract elite talent on and off the field. Someone who commands immediate respect from the playing group, from the supporters, and the wider footy community in general. So, B-Man, now you can take it away with your thoughts on the sacking of Goodwin, his replacement, the whole shebang, if you want to answer any of the questions or one of them wanted you to go over one of your posts. Floor is yours.
Oh, floor is mine, Andy. It's like the interregnum. Interregnum. That is that's the term for a period between two distinct periods, particularly between the reigns of two leaders or civilizations. So it's the Chaplin interregnum. Great summary of Goody, just so that doesn't get washed away in the the best coach in my football following lifetime, Goody, if on the off chance you happen to be listening to this, sincerest thanks from the bottom of my heart for everything you brought to the club, including, a grit and physicality. I think that he'll find his feet. He'll get he'll go to another club. I'd be very surprised if he's not a senior coach at another club at some stage. There was a really good post on Demonland, a link to, I forget the poster's name, an article that you might have actually put a link to, I can't recall, but talking about that it shouldn't be forgotten that he took the template that Hardwick laid down for the premiership and took it up a notch to change football to an extent where the pendulum swing to where transition footy was in a direct result to what Goody did in 2021 and 22, 23. It's beginning of 22, that first 10, 11 games, we were just unpassable. And the way McRae and others, but particularly McRae and probably Pagan to a lesser, what's his name, the Brisbane coach, but
Fagan,
to a lesser degree, was a response to it. So I don't think that should ever be forgotten. And I also don't think it should be forgotten that, he triggered the 666 rule by his use of the flying V off the halfback flank. And so in addition to being a really innovative coach, I always have thought that he's a really underrated coach. Thanks, Goody. In terms of him going, I think the timing of it, it's too early in the day to determine whether it's the right choice, because not so much whether it's the right choice in the timing is that I'll get into this in a second around Buckley, but I'll be furious if basically they haven't got Buckley or someone 95% down the road, because otherwise why jump? Carlton didn't they basically flag they'll give Voss till May. So unless they had a coach squared away, and I assume Buckley is the one that we're talking about.
But why? Sorry to interrupt you. I said you had the floor, but why form a committee if they
because
don't have
you've
Buckley?
got to form a committee, don't you?
Yeah,
You've got to go through the charade and look. There's talk about due diligence. You're going to be talking to coaches all the time. So there was the reporting, you mentioned Caro before, the reporting that she mentioned back in April or whatever, that we'd put feelers out or at least some sort of conversation about Beveridge. So, it wouldn't surprise me if there were those conversations. In fact, I'd be really furious if they weren't. If they haven't gone down the fairway down the road of landing a coach, then this is just another governance fail. I mean, I've talked enough in the last few weeks about our governance failures and in particularly our comms. So that's number one, is that, why form a committee? Because let's say you got Buckley 95% across the line, you've still got to get him all the way. And what happens if at the last minute he doesn't take it? So he's obviously not obviously, he's probably, maybe there's some sort of understanding, but he's unlikely to have signed anything. No. So, if they haven't, I'll be furious. If we come into the trade period and we haven't squared away a coach, like they talk about before the grand final, all the messages is, if you read between the lines, is that they've progressed it. So I really, really hope they do, because if it don't, it's a epic fail from a governance perspective. Just in terms of how
I'll just add to that. I think we have to have someone squared away before the trade period, because we need someone.
We're talking 2 months before then. So
yeah, I know.
That's what I mean. If this is an open, if it legitimately is open and they haven't got, say, Buckley or, another coach in mind to line up, then it's a fail. Because if we're going into that trade period and we're desperately still hunting around for a coach, then for me it's a fail. In terms of how it was handled, I mean, footy's footy. I talked about it last 2 weeks ago. In fact, after the Carlton game, when you did a spiel about sacking Goodwin, and about the need to sack Goodwin, that, it's footy, isn't it? 10 years is a long time, 11 years at the club, 9 years as senior coach is a long time. It's a bit like the laws of football gravity, is that, unless, unless you're winning finals, you're gonna be in the frame for getting sacked. So I would just argue that the handling of it, I was really furious with the handling of it. Again, it comes down to just woeful communication. You cannot tell me that the board did not, or someone did not brief Michael Gleeson. Those 2 articles he wrote, in particular the second one. The first one I wrote on Demonland, it looked like it was a cut and paste memo from a board. It wasn't a leak. It looked like a full background briefing. And then the second one, which barely got any chatter on Demonland, everyone was jumping on the Caro article, but happy enough to let Gleeson's clearly briefed article go through. The second one was like a sort of minute by minute breakdown of how the board, every man and his dog went round to Goody's place to try and get ahead of it. But what I was upset about, particularly, well, for anyone, but Goody is the best coach in my footy lifetime, as I said. Sure, if you make the decision to sack him 3 weeks out, okay, I get that. If particularly, as I said, hopefully that because they've got someone squared away, so you get on the bike and that rumour gets out there. Maybe McVie signs when he wasn't going to sign, all of that stuff. Maybe you attract a player that you weren't going to attract.
My call for sacking wasn't really, it was more for the end of the year. It wasn't an immediate thing, by the way.
The timing, I think that's just footy, so I'm not particularly wound up about.
Was there any fear to try and get in front of Carlton?
Yeah, well,
as it
turns out, they didn't sack Voss. So,
we prompted them to definitely have a 5-hour board meeting for sure.
Maybe, but
us getting out.
More, what I would have preferred to have seen is less briefing of age journalists.
Well,
I was
clearly there's leaks.
Ropeable. I was just ropeable, totally ropeable. That the person who broke it was Tom Bloody Morris. Like, come on. Like, I don't blame him. He's a journalist. So you're going to get some information, no worries. So he was either directly leaked to, or alternatively, Goody was told, we know this because it was in Michael Gleeson's article with a minute-by-minute breakdown of the sacking of Simon Goodwin, is that he was told at 7 o'clock at night, or Brad Green gave him a call, and then every man and his dog went round to Goodwin's house to say, look, sorry, we love you still, but, it's time for a fresh start, yada, yada, yada. All good, no worries, except for the fact they should have immediately called a press conference for the next day. It would have been clear to everyone what was happening. First thing Friday morning. But when was the press conference? Not till bloody midday or something. So you get 4 or 5 hours. 1 o'clock. You get 5-6 hours, your morning breakfast time, even before that, 5-6 hours of nonsense, all swirling around in the media. Again, Melbourne didn't get in front of it. I just
some of the players apparently found out in a meeting by social media.
Well, and also Maxi found out, he said, and like all of which got discussed in those 5 or 6 hours. And for me, that's just completely disrespectful to Goody. Tell him, sure, no worries. Sack him, okay, it's footy. It happens all the time. It's their call. So that's the thing, as I've talked about for weeks and weeks. It's governance is the key thing in footy clubs. It's not your senior coach. It's your high-performance program, and it's your off-field, your executive, your CEO and your board, rowing together and doing a decent job. So, they live and die by that call, figuratively or metaphorically. That's their decision. That's what they join boards for. That's what CEO gets paid for, the stand-in COO, I might add. But show Goody some respect and control the narrative, and don't funnel it through Tom Morris. Like, as I said, I've got nothing against him breaking it. That's what, he's a journalist. What do you expect? Why couldn't have they told Goody at the same time and announced that there would be a press conference first thing on SEN, on Gary Lyons' show, 7 a.m., bang. Doesn't have 5-6 hours of what's going on and all of that. That's to me the thing that infuriates me. And again, it's just another example of our woeful comms. So the sacking, it's I'm not going to get too upset about a fella who it's footy, isn't it? And it's not like he's not going to walk away with destitute or anything like that. So. That's footy. I thought he handled himself super well. I thought it was just telling, though. It was completely telling what he mentioned 3 times in that press conference. Stability. he enjoyed a period of stability, that PJ and Mahoney came in, that was stable. There's a strong argument you could make that we won the flag because of that stability. Yes, Pert was the CEO at the time, but the stability has eroded since then, and it's completely parallel to our on-field, how we've been on field. And I just think that, that whole, like I said, after the Blues game, when we were talking about it, is that whole, sack the coach thing is so 1985. It doesn't change anything unless you're going to get your ducks in a row off field. Look, and this is the getting back, onto the bigger question of what's next. This is, if it is an example of that well thought out process, then there's a real opportunity of a new CEO, new president, new coach, with a fresh start. There's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot to be said for fresh voices and that getting new voices in. So I really, obviously, can't say more about Goody and what he's brought to the footy club. The final thing I'll say about Goody is that it's going to be my complete new pet hate, and it's going to drive me nuts all the way through to next season, no matter what happens, is, beware the sort of tendency to rewrite history. Like, already it's coming up. While we were so much more attacking in this game, it's just a complete and utter nonsense. It's a complete and utter nonsense, and it does my head in. And, fine, whatever you think of Goody, is let's not rewrite history and start a whole lot of new myths about him, and let's pay credit for what he did, trying to implement a game style that was radically different to the game style that won him a flag, to his own detriment. He got sacked, because he could have probably eked out a few more wins, and maybe he could have protected himself. We went, in the last, since the bye, in the last 7 weeks, we've been top 4 for ball movement. I've been talking about that for weeks. It wasn't, people love the fact that we were aggressive in this game. We were no more aggressive than we've been since the bye. We've been trying to implement that all season, and that's Goody. And so the new coach presumably will implement a similar method, a high transition game, though I will find it ironic if it's Buckley and he goes straight back to his defence first model that he had at Collingwood. So, that's on Buckley. That's on Goody. And, thanks, Goody. As for the next coach, this is the short version. This is the post that Norm Smith was referring to. The short version, my take on the next coach, the short version is, despite my misgivings about Buckley, I think appointing him coach would be a good move, and I'll fully back him in if they do. The longer version of that is, I've always been ambivalent about Buckley. He was a famously defensive coach at Collingwood, and we're moving to a more offensive model. Not to say that he can't change that approach, but for instance, Lyon hasn't particularly. Yes, he came close to a flag, but he was sacked on the back of a woeful season too, in fact, and his replacement McRae turned much the same list into a competitive unit immediately. The knock on him at the time, as a coach, was that he wasn't such a great manager of people and had a propensity to judge others by that really myopic, hyper-driven standards he set for himself as a player. If you remember, when he was a player, he was ahead of his time in terms of his commitment to fitness, but he reminds me a lot of Rao, actually, that sort of hyper-driven robot type. Yeah. And add to that, I've never really warmed to him, never liked him a huge amount. But I think against those misgivings, which, are more vibe-based, I think it's totally reasonable to counter-argue that I agree with you. I think we need to go with an experienced coach like Buckley or Longmire. Longmire's taken himself out of the equation, that is, as you mentioned, has gravitas and won't need to earn the respect of players the way any new coach would. I totally agree with Goodwin in the presser and Langdon in his comments that we're actually not far from away from being a contender again, meaning we are not in full rebuild mode, which is a scenario that, again, I think that suits an experienced coach. And just on that point, the fact that Buckley's even interested, hasn't said no, suggests he also believes we're not far from being a contender. There's no chance he's up for years-long rebuild like McQualter or Uze. And just on that point, there was an article today, ABC News quotes from Ruse did a podcast or does a podcast with someone, and he was quoted as saying, "I think Melbourne is a different kettle of fish to," who was he talking about? I can't remember who he was talking about. "I think they are way better than people are giving them credit for. If you get the right off-season moves, I'll go on the record, they could win a flag next year. Not the year after, they could win a flag next year." He just said this yesterday or this morning. They've got 14 to 16 premiership players on their list right now. They won a premiership in 2021. They're not super old, so I think this is a different one. If I'm someone like a Nathan Buckley, I'm not taking this job to resurrect this team. I'm taking this job to win a premiership in the next 2 to 3 years, Ruse said. That's the mandate for me. And I think that's really critical. And so, that's why Buckley's interested. That's why I think he'll be our coach, is what my feeling is. Experienced candidate like Buckley would also have the power within limits to call the shots on key hiring and firing, which was mentioned in one of the questions. And I think it's super important because a inexperienced coach wouldn't have that sort of pull. Buckley's going to be able to, he'll demand veto on his assistant coach.
That's why that's definitely one of the big reasons. Gravitas, as you mentioned, marketability as well.
Absolutely. And attracting players,
Yeah,
he'll walk
that's
in with
massive.
respect, won't he?
The attracting players, especially in this trade period. I mean, we've traded in some no names over the last couple of years, and I think we do just need to complement our list with one, maybe two.
I agree. I mean, it's going to be hard. So, I mean, hopefully on the back of the other, I mentioned 3 things that they could announce: a new coach, new CEO, new president. Well, how great would it be if the new CEO and president and coach could all stand in front of a picture of Caulfield and announce our new training base at the same time? Right? And that, it really is important that we get that right.
Before you go on, we did have a caller on the line. If you want to call back. You might just have to wait a couple of minutes, but while we finish this off, but we'll get to you in a sec.
And Buckley would demand his own line coaches, and I think we really need it, to be honest, and we'll get into the stats a little bit, and particularly new assistant coaches. I think some tough calls need to be made about our high performance program, and Bucks was way ahead of his time in terms of his commitment to his own fitness, and I think he'll have firm views in that space. I suspect he'll drive change. It's reasonable, I think, to sort of argue that McRae actually built on the foundations Buckley built. So his success arguably would not be possible without the work that Buckley did. And I think that's particularly true in regards to driving training standards. And they were already super fit when McRae took them over. And the success wouldn't have been possible that McRae's had without that aerobic base, because, given how aerobically taxing the method is that McRae uses. It would go, if we got Buckley soon, it would go a long way to assuage my concerns. The exec made an ill-considered vibe-based decision to sack Goody, and do so when he did 3 games from the end of the season.
Well, there was just, and I've seen it now on Twitter, on one of the show's agenda setters. I've got some audio here. The quote that they've got here, it's even been suggested that there'd been unofficial conversations between Melbourne and Nathan Buckley before they sacked the coach. So this is along the all lines of saying, let's get their ducks in a row before. So I just want to hear this. All right.
Competitive tension around him now. It's not him pitching himself against the others. It's them, Melbourne, pitching him against Tassie, which we'll talk to in a moment. So he controls the decision here a little bit. I think if he wants the job, it's his job.
Craig, I reckon...
Without doubt.
I reckon that Melbourne were way more interested in Nathan Buckley than they were in John Longmire or Adam Simpson. It's even been suggested that there'd been unofficial conversations between the club and Nathan Buckley before they sacked the coach.
Prior to Simon Goodwin, which was categorically denied at the press conference.
That's my
unofficial. They've had a crack at Luke Beveridge and Nathan Buckley before they sacked Simon Goodwin.
They've certainly been prepared to look at both of them, and I think conversations took place.
And then Nathan would be... This story won't help Nathan's view, because Nathan's got to get past the instability that's there to make as part of his decision making. And he sort of hasn't. I mean, he put his hand up in essence last week, but today it was interesting. There's a little bit more balanced on it, I thought, on the Waitley program.
I mean, I'm not going to do blow by blows as we go through this. I've been out of coaching for a little bit longer, so I know exactly where they're at. And I'm still working out whether I'm there or whether I'm in. So I'm well and truly on the fence. But there's a raft of really good options, and there'll be a raft of really good eventualities. And I'm prosecuting whether I'm one of them.
So he's on the fence in the parlance of today, and there won't be a running commentary. What's the better job, Tasmania or Melbourne?
Depends if he wants a premiership. I mean, I think if you're Nathan Buckley, you are desperate to get a premiership. Now, your best chance of getting that right now with the job is Melbourne. You've got enough senior players there. You've got some young players coming through. It's not ideal, and the lack of stability, I understand it, I get it, but they're far more advanced in winning a premiership than Tassie are.
If Tassie they are, because Tassie aren't there yet.
So what do you want? You want Bucks to be 60 when there's a prospect of them even being ready to compete?
Well, there have been other pretty successful 60-year-old coaches, and I think Nathan Buckley is could be a history-making coach. I wrote about it in The Age on Saturday. I think with all Melbourne's issues, I think Tasmania is way more...
I can't listen to Caro. I'm sorry.
There's no way, I like Caro, but there's no way he's in it for 20 years. No, Buckley Corns is right. He wants success.
Yeah, I think if he signed, it'd be a 3 max 4-year contract.
Yeah, and he's not even the right person. Like, that's, it's a complete nonsense. So the whole talk, I mean, it drives me nuts. I mean, that all of those people are all been involved in footy. How can they say that with a straight face about, they talked to Buckley before the sacking? Of course. Like, I'd be frustrated if Melbourne Footy Club didn't,
If Melbourne didn't, if they knew they didn't, she'd be saying...
Well, of course.
they'd be saying, why didn't Melbourne have their ducks in a row before they sacked... it'd be the exact opposite.
Yeah, exactly. And so back to Bucks is sort of...
sorry.
He's noted himself that he's mellowed and that he had to a little bit.
I think he was just... I think today was just...
I don't mean then, and just generally in terms of it was pretty hard. That was the feedback, is that often he held people to his hyper-driven standard that he had himself, and that he was pretty hardcore on players who didn't, who were perhaps less driven than he was as a player. He's acknowledged that he needs to chill in that space. I think he was probably at Pies. He was on a hiding to nothing at the Pies as, the whole legend player of a team that becomes their head coach. That often has a happy, unhappy ending, doesn't it? We saw it with Barras, with Voss is an example at Brisbane. Lepage is another example at Brisbane.
Wasn't there a bit of controversy with the handover? Didn't it happen like the handover
with Malthouse? Of course. Malthouse didn't want to let it go, and he ended up at Carlton. He didn't want to give it to Buckley. So
I think it wasn't that
it was a bit of a poison chalice.
It wasn't that he didn't want to give it to him. It was brought forward a year, I believe.
Something
like that.
And the other thing I think is, it'd be great if being a good media operator wasn't such an important KPI for a senior coach. I think it's ridiculous, really. But the reality is it is. So I think that's definitely an important factor, important KPI for a senior coach. And Buckley is unquestionably good, isn't he, in terms of being a savvy media operator. And it's particularly important for us, given, we've relied on Maxi and Goody for the last 3 years, basically, to front the media. So all things considered, I hope we do land Buckley. I actually think we will. I'll fully back him in if he does. And as I wrote on BMLand, there'd certainly be an irony if Buckley comes in and has immediate success with a team that has struggled in the previous 2 seasons. So I think that the story will write itself. Is Buckley's the new McRae, and but as the final point for me is in terms of choosing Bucks who or wherever, as I've said a number of times, I'm firmly of the view that whilst the coaches, of course, are important, I'm not saying it's not important who the coach is. The impact, I think, of the AFL coach is hugely overrated, and I'm simply more concerned we sort our governance, off-field governance, and get the high performance stuff right.
Well, the governance thing.
Sorry?
The governance thing was what they were alluding to in there about the instability, because the segment before then they were talking about some ongoing issues at board level with Brad Green and incoming President Stephen Smith. This was just some points that one of the Demonlanders, Dazzle Davey, had noted down from the clip that we've got. I won't play the clip, but they said supposedly the Goodwin sacking was purely a Brad Green decision, not entirely sure where Smith stands on this. So Stephen Smith was supposed to start in a few weeks, but now apparently Greeny is pushing his start time back to December because now he wants to stay involved and see everything through. And I think what they said on the clip was to the end of the AFLW season. They mentioned that there's clearly a disconnect off-field at leadership level with board members probably not being aligned with one another. Off-field issues now going to be a major barrier for potentially Nathan Buckley or any other coach due to our messy board level and lack of stability. And I don't know if that's just Caro muckraking because she certainly has been a bonnet about the Ds. I know you like her, but I never see her saying anything positive. And sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire, and maybe there is. But
look, yeah. But she's a journalist. Her remit isn't to say things positive. I think it's pretty shooting fish in a barrel, criticising our governance. Come on, and so. That's exactly what I mean, is that for me, good governance is talking to Buckley before you sack your coach. And so I hope they have done. And if it's derailed, if that's right, if it was a Green decision, not a Smith decision, well, then, that speaks to the challenges we've got of, a board.
But Stephen Smith was they had a meeting with Goody the week before, and I believe Stephen Smith was there. So it's...
Well, zoomed in because he's still overseas. Yeah. But we've got Caro's article, the other one that I mentioned last week. I can't remember if I said this on the podcast, but she noted that our comms director's also head of AFLW in another role. It's like Marco Rubio's, gets put in charge of anything that moves over in the States. I hope we do get Bucks. It's a good sign, I reckon, that he's keen to come. But just before we go on, Andy, I don't have much. I have very little sort of inside sources, and unlike you with your intimate connections with players and and your long-term relationship with Maxi, but from an impeccable source for whom I trust, I did get some intel from the club, and let's just say that the timing of not having a podcast that game, it came up in discussion between someone who's in the know at the club. And basically, this is the rumour I've heard, Andy. I'm happy for you to knock it down, is that you put a line in the sand with the club and said, if you do not do something about Goodwin, the Demonland podcast is off. And then you pulled it. You said it wasn't on, and they panicked. They blinked, and the next thing you know, Goody's gone. So, Simon, if you are listening,
if only I had such power. Sadly, not. Do you have any thoughts on any of the other assistants going around? Do you know much about them? There's been a lot of names thrown out there. Corey Enright,
really. I don't really have.
Daly,
it's a bit like trading players in. I don't, it's like I don't have a say in this. So,
It's the type of thing you're always really nervous, and maybe I'm just scared about, Mark Neild, who was a highly touted assistant coach. Everyone thought he was was saying he was the architect to Collingwood's, was it their premiership at the time?
And famously won a grand final at Ocean Grove, or 6 or 7 in a row,
of course,
or something.
As important as that is. But then sometimes they're not cut out for coaching, or they just don't have the cattle to do it. I mean, we've probably got the cattle, but always nervous about someone with no experience. So that doesn't mean they're not going to be successful. But it doesn't mean Buckley's going to be successful just because he's got experience, or Longmire or Adam Simpson or anyone else. So it's a bit of a risk either way, but.
And experience does.
The things I like about, as I said, about Buckley was some of the other things he brings, whether it's the marketability, the gravitas, the ability to the respect, the being able to pull in players, just on his name alone.
I think we need to go for an experienced coach. So I'd be happy if we get Buckley. The vibe seems to be that that's what will happen. Hopefully, Caro hasn't scared him away with.
Well, that's what I'm scared they're doing. But
white-handing us,
and there'll be a lot more articles about how unstable
the club
we
couldn't
are.
land a senior coach, but
if Buckley pulls out.
Yeah,
we'll get an assistant. Someone wants they all want a job. Like a lot of these assistants all want to be senior coaches.
But like I think we need we need someone with runs on the board, and that's really what we're needing at the moment.
What do you make of Troy Chaplin coming straight out of the blocks and saying, not that really he's not interested. He sort of said it in a way that caretaker coaches don't really have a good record of being able to take the job, but I don't think that would be a reason not to even go for it. And I got the vibe, and I don't know anything, that maybe he was told he's no chance. I don't know.
Well, that's what I reckon. I mean, what he should have said is he should have said interregnum in his presser. I would have been more impressed with that, but he didn't. And
you didn't even remember the word.
Yeah, I suspect that he said, that he was told, well, you're not going to get it, so don't even bother.
That's what it sounded like, didn't it?
Yeah. So
just to come out and say that, because all the assistants want to be a senior coach. I mean,
well, he does. He's openly said it.
Yeah, he said it. He said it in the press the other day.
That was one of the questions. Personally, if it was me, I can't remember if it was in this question or the next one. Is there this one about if you're executive, or is it the next one?
Oh, yeah, someone did say, like, if you're GM, what would you do with all the assistants and the high performance?
Yeah, well, if I had my druthers and I was coming in, I would make Buckley senior coach and let him completely choose his assistant coach. I'd get rid of Ratcliffe, I'd get rid of Jones, and I think the only I'd get rid of Choco Williams, and the person that I'd keep is Chaplin. That'd be the only.
Yeah, Chaplin I'd definitely keep. But there could be a financial aspect to all this. We've had to pay Goody out the $1 million, and fair enough, he's owed that. But Buckley's got to command a sizable salary. If he wants to bring in his own team, and maybe that'll seal the deal of him not coming. If they say, no, you have to keep everyone who's here, because
they won't, though. That's the thing about the power.
I don't know what everyone's contracts are, whether we have to pay them out. I don't know what the deal is. I'm sure you have to pay people out unless they're at the end of their contract.
They'd be surely the assistant coaches be on year to year, though. Like Jones.
I have no idea. I've no idea what that is.
I can't imagine Buckley even agreeing to coach unless he says I can choose my assistant coaches.
Well, that's what I'm afraid of. They're going to say, no, we can't afford it.
Well, solely to goodness, they would have worked all of that stuff out. Like, if they haven't, then the governance is even worse. Then that's what Carey should be working. They did it all on the back of an envelope and realised, oh, Jesus, we can't sack any of our assistant coaches. The ones that have done such a bang-up job with our midfield stoppages and setups.
All right, well, where am I on here? All right, anything else on Goody? I mean,
it's a week's a long time in footy is all I'll say. It's like last week we're talking about an 86-point win, and a few days later we're waking up and hearing Tom Morris tell us that our
I just wonder why the timing in terms of then. They must have been trying to jump the gun on Carlton. They must have been worried that.
Well, I suspect they just didn't want to look like they were jumping it after the St Kilda debacle.
Yeah, but then to do it after an 86-point win.
That's when Goody was asked to present to the thingo. Yes. And really, if in hindsight, that's when we should have really known that he was in deep trouble, when he said himself, I've got the full confidence of the board, or the board's always been very supportive.
As soon as he said that, usually it's the board saying it.
So I blame him. What was he thinking?
But also, I think there might have been, from Melbourne's point of view, is that we want to do this now because we need to have someone in place in the finals.
I've got no issue, as I said before, with the timing of it, in terms of assuming it's part of, there's a logic to it, and we won't know that until time has passed. So, the question as to whether it was the right move is we don't have the full information to determine the answer to that question yet. So, as I said, my only real concern was, why didn't they just call a presser for 7 a.m. in the morning? And then people could have gossiped all night, but it wouldn't have clagged up the radio airwaves from 7 till 12 and just created fodder. I'm sick of the club wading into fodder and giving, it's ridiculous to blame the media, knowing that it's like blaming your dog for barking when you keep it's like it's the media's job is to gossip. So why give it to them?
Well, caller didn't call back, so let's move on.
It might have been Goody to talk to you about that line in the sand.
The username that came up was Demon Spirit.
Well, it's probably not Goody then.
Yeah, he's moved on.
Formerly Demon Spirit.
In a week where off-field headlines threatened to overshadow on-field performance, the Melbourne Demons responded with one of their most spirited displays of 2025, only to fall agonisingly short in a 6-point thriller against the Western Bulldogs. The match, played in front of 34,733 fans on Pink Lady Day, was the first under caretaker coach Troy Chaplin following the shock sacking of Premiership coach Simon Goodwin. For long stretches, the Demons looked poised to pull off an upset that would derail the Bulldogs' finals aspirations, but a final quarter surge from the Dogs saw them prevail by the aforementioned 6 points. Melbourne's afternoon began in similar fashion to much of their 2025 season, slow out of the blocks and on the back foot. With no Stephen May or Jake Lever marshalling the backline, the Bulldogs' twin towers of Aaron Norton and Sam Darcy loom large, and early on they threatened to blow the game open, yet despite conceding more inside 50s and allowing Bailey Dale to run rampant off halfback, the Demons stayed in touch through moments of opportunism from Jake Melksham and Jai Cully, the latter continuing to impress after his SSP lifeline. At the main break, Melbourne trailed by just 10 points despite 11 fewer inside 50s, a testament to their defensive resilience and efficiency going forward. Whatever was said in the rooms at halftime had an instant impact, led by Captain Max Gawn, who once again reminded all Australian selectors of his standing with a towering ruck display. The Demons exploded in the third quarter with a scintillating burst of attacking football. The transition from defence to attack was rapid, clean and clinical, with Clayton Oliver producing his best game of the season and Christian Petrarca lifting after a quiet start. The goals flowed. Bailey Fritsch slotted his second. Cozzy Pickett ignited the crowd with a crumbing major. Harrison Petty kicked truly and Melksham added another. In the space of 20 minutes, Melbourne turned a deficit into a 10-point lead at the final change, kicking 7 goals to 4 for the term. The quarter was also highlighted the emergence of Melbourne's next generation. Harvey Langford continued his consistent form, while first gamer Jed Adams, after almost 3 seasons and 51 VFL games, held his own in a daunting matchups on Norton and Darcy. Daniel Turner provided some valuable intercept work. If the third quarter belonged to Melbourne, the final term was the Bulldogs' redemption. With their season on the line, they responded with 6 goals to 4, spearheaded by Ed Richards and Norton. Late in the term, Turner sneaked forward and the defender turned forward Gold with less than a minute left to bring the margin back to 1 straight kick. The Demons surged again, but a courageous back with the flight mark from Sam Darcy in the dying seconds shut the door on a fairy tale first up win for the caretaker coach. Max Gawn again was a dominant force again in the ruck, driving Melbourne's third quarter resurgence. Clayton Oliver back to his contested best, winning clearances and lifting the midfield. Harrison Petty had his best outing for the season with 2 goals, 7 marks and several clever forward assists. Tom McDonald, again the veteran, led a depleted defence and battled hard against elite opposition. Harvey Langford and Jai Cully, a couple of young midfielders who stood up in big moments. Jed Adams, an encouraging debut showing composure and physicality in defence. Blake Howes, the sub, kicked his first AFL goal in the last term, sparking late hope. And while the loss stung, there were significant positives from Melbourne. The younger brigade is starting to emerge. The style of ball movement in the third quarter was a glimpse of a more attacking future, and the side fought until the final siren despite a challenging week. The next coach will inherit a group that, while inconsistent, is far from broken, and if the Demons can bottle that third quarter electricity more consistently, they could trouble anyone in 2026. So, B-Man, you want to take it away with those stats? You might be on mute.
It was an entertaining second half, wasn't it? And I thought actually, even though it was pretty scrappy in the first half, I thought it was an entertaining first half as well. But definitely entertaining second half. 7 goals in that third quarter was terrific. Just as a thing though, like if I was a Dogs fan, I'd be really worried. Like they're not a top tier team. They, that. The way we were able to open them up in that third quarter, it was shocking defense by them. So, and when I was going through the stats to look at why they won and how we could have won, was pretty well weighted to why they won. There wasn't many stats that jumped out to why we could have or should have won. So I didn't actually think it was a very good performance from the Dogs, and I'd be concerned about their chances if I was them of making finals. The player ratings were really interesting. Maxi, another just fantastic game. Keeping in mind 20 player rating points is considered an elite game of footy. He had 23.2, 8.3 in the third quarter when we were dominant. Such a champion. I keep saying this, but I reckon his contested marking is better now than it's ever been. And, he's just improved so much in that regard. I mean, I'm sure part of it is the way Goody's used him not to get smashed around as much as he had. They don't go down the line as much as they did. What happens is the opposition go down the line and kick to him. His ability to get back and run back when we've turned the ball over, which unfortunately is pretty frequently, is unbelievable. Another huge game from him. You mentioned Harrison Petty. Can't recall, I think you might have said this, but I agree if you did. His best game for the season, 18.6 points, which was terrific. This probably speaks to, our performance was a little bit middling in some respects. I think it was an enjoyable game, but that's why I'd be a bit worried if I was a Dog fan. There's a real drop-off to the next player, who was Jai Cully, who backed up from last week and his debut, and he was the third highest rated Demon on the field with 13.8.
I really like him. Sorry to interrupt. I really do like him. I think I would have liked to have seen him sooner, but that's the way it is. Yeah.
Well, I don't know about soon. I mean, to be honest, he wasn't banging the door down so loud.
No, well, that's what someone said. I just liked what I saw when he first came to training, and I was like, yeah, I want to see this guy. What I mean was I wanted to see him in the team sooner. I know he was well, but I think he had the attributes.
Well, the other thing is, though, that he, again, hats off to Goody for it was only 4 or 5 weeks ago they made him into a winger, and that's what they brought him in here with, a clear plan to play on the opposite wing to the Bison. So, he's slotted into that position. I had the binoculars on the team at the 3/4 time, and he's taller than, for some reason or other, because of the positions he's playing as a mid, he's played mainly.
I said it last week. He looked tall against Petty, and even next to Max, he didn't look, Max towers over everyone, but he didn't look like him.
So big boy dropped a couple of marks that were pretty crucial, one in particular. But, great game from him. And as I mentioned last week, it seems to be a thing in footy at the moment. Like Dawson is the winger, like taller wingers who can push forward. It used to be Langdon types who was all about the running and the arc-to-arc, end-to-end running. But I think now being able to push forward and be a legitimate marking option pushing forward. What's the blonde-headed player for Cats? The young guy.
They've got 83 blonde-haired players with the headbands.
I'll think of his name
Dempsey.
in a sec, but he's playing that
Ollie
role.
Dempsey?
Sorry?
Ollie Dempsey.
Yeah, Dempsey. So he
yeah.
plays the wing and pushes forward to be a legitimate marking target. And I think that seems to be something that's developed in footy. And they've brought in Jai Cully to play that role. And he's 2 games in. He looks like he's slotting right into that. Speaking of the Bison, Harvey Langford was our 4th highest rated player. Great in the last quarter, 5.2.
How good was that mark? That was what last week we were saying. He dropped a couple. Yeah, and he'll start clanking those.
He was, and the way he kicked that goal around his body, like I was confident that he was going to kick it. Yeah. And, can't say that about many Melbourne players. So he was our 4th highest rated player, 13.4, and rounding out the top 5, Disco Turner. He had a great game, 12 points. And he's marking. I just love the way he reads the ball. He extends. And I love the fact he goes for it. I think a really big factor in this game, and a reason why we didn't win it, and conversely why they won it, is they had X Factor players, and I'll speak to one in a second that you touched on, Richards. But our best X Factor players, Maxi Gorn's not really a player he's just gonna be awesome all game, but he's not going to be the X Factor who kicks the clutch goals. And so Cozzy had a down day.
Cozzy's disposal, I don't know what
disposal. Those little dinky kicks,
he did it last week as well.
Yeah, the one where he got he did a little dinky kick and it got touched. We had 3 players ahead of the ball and he just needed to get it over the top and we were away with the races. Turned it over and went up the other end and scored a goal. There's a 2-goal turnaround right there. He did a couple of brain fades and so he wasn't our X factor. And it's really interesting you mentioned that being a really good game by Claz. It was in fact 9.6. Clayton Oliver was pretty middling in terms of his player. Judd McVie had a good game, 9.9, best game for him for a while, I thought. But the big one that I wanted to flag in terms of we're just not getting, from him that what we need, that X factor is track. 8.6.
There's something up with track.
There's
I don't know.
something up. And he's playing generally pretty well, but what we need is not a player playing generally pretty well like a Sparrow, or not that he played well, but you know what I mean? We need a genuine All-Australian star who's going to kick the goal that we desperately need to win and crack the game open. That's what we need.
He's just I'm not expecting a grand final performance that he did every week, but he's just so far off it at the moment.
He's doing my head in. He's just not one touching. He's fumbling all the time. And 2, I'm convinced that he's still not fully sort of worked through the injury, which is totally understandable. And so hopefully after a pre-season, he'll be in a better place for that next season. But
if he's still at the club,
even those really long handballs. Now they're probably part of the way that we want to play is those long handballs. But 2 of them turned it over. And they were to 2v1 sort of situations. And sometimes it feels a little bit like him not wanting to take on the high-risk kick or wanting to get rid of it before he gets smashed. Or in any case, he turned it over twice. It cost us goals. And so did Disco cost us a goal early with just a shocking kick. So right down the bottom, Tommy Sparrow is an interesting one. And, we'll talk increasingly as we approach the end of the season about who might have trade value. Tommy Sparrow, I loved Tommy Sparrow, Captain Jack, and but if you're going to get some players in with skill, you've got to be prepared to trade players out. Maybe he's a player, but he had a pretty average game, 3.8 player ratings, and a bit of a worry right down the bottom again. He's been down the bottom a bit of late. Is Eddie Langdon? He was our lowest rated player, only 2.2. Why we lost, the expected score, it should be noted, was 105.3. That's what their expected score was, and they scored 105. We were above our expected score of 93.6, and we scored 99. So on an expected score, the Doggies win that by 2 goals. They end up winning it by 1. Now, one of the challenges, talk about the stoppages, and the raw number of stoppages isn't really the key stat. It scores from stoppages, but the sort of against that is that if you're really getting smashed in stoppages, it's really hard to win territory, particularly from the centre. And I thought that was a big factor in the game, is that for the game it was 55-45. 45% in our forward line, 55% in our defensive line, against our season average of 52 in our forward and 48. It should be roughly 50-50. With a transition game, it should be roughly 50-50. So they had too much of it in their forward half. It should be noted with their clearance. They're the number one clearance. I mentioned this last week. They're the number one clearance side in the AFL. So it's no shock that they touched us up a little bit. What that translated to, that territory, is had 15 more inside 50s, 6 more shots at goal than us. And if that was Melbourne reverse, and they'd lost the game, we'd be saying, how did we lose that game with forward half domination and 15 more inside 50s? So, and the answer for us would have been inaccuracy, and it would have been for them too, if not for coming good in the second half, including Norton, whose kicking was just beautiful, I have to say.
The 1 week you can't miss.
Yeah, 1 week you can't miss. The one he kicked from the boundary, I was right behind that. Give me a spell, please. Come on, miss it.
Flushed it straight through the middle.
Oh, Jesus, didn't he? So from the set of bounces, from scoring, so it's not really about the raw number of clearances, though they did dominate in that respect. We were minus 11 from the centre bounces, but, 3-1-19 to 1-2-8. So, but again, it was another game where we're just not scoring out of the middle. Stoppages, we were actually +7, 3-1-19 to 1-6-12. So we were down 4 from stoppages. So, like, as much as they, I would put an argument we just didn't take advantage of Maxi giving English a complete and utter old-fashioned bath. He thrashed him. And so we should have done more with what we were able to do. And I don't put that on Maxi. I put that on the mids and the stoppage coaches, to be honest, and the midfield coaches. Turnover, again, wasn't a reason why we lost, but only because their turnover was woeful. So, again, I'd be really worried if I was a Dogs fan. The turnover, we conceded 59 points from turnover. That's way, way, way too high. They arguably should have taken bigger advantage of that. They kicked 10-7, 67, so it was actually down 8. They scored 67 points on turnover. We scored 67 points on turnover. So we scored 59. They scored 67. So we're down 8 on that. Like that's woeful. And then they beat us on transition. So these numbers are interesting. They beat us on transition. So defensive 50 to forward 50%. They 36.7 at the time they did it. We were 26.5% on transition for that defensive 50 to forward 50. They killed us. So our all-ground defence was woeful. I thought you're right. Our back 7 stood up really well given how fast that ball was coming in. But it's worth noting that though they smashed us for transition, the AFL average is 22.8 and we were 26.5%. Defensive 50 to score percentage, they smashed us as well, 10.2 to 20. Again, though, the AFL average is 9.6. So our transition was actually pretty good, just not as good as theirs. Defensive half to forward, 50% transition. Ours was 32%. They did it 46.7% of the time, which tells me that our all-ground defence, as I said before, was woeful. That's the difference of 14.7%. Again, though, the AFL average for that stat, defensive half to forward, 50% is 31. So we're above AFL average for all of these stats, all of these transition stats. It's just that they were heaps better. And big one, defensive half to score percentage, we were 14.7, AFL average 12.8. But the problem was they were 23.3. And I reckon that's really where we lost it on transition. And that came down to, I think, our all-team defence was all over the shop a bit, and we really struggled to stop them on transition. And that, as much as anything, was a structural thing and a little bit fitness thing as well, I reckon. How we could have won, we were, conversely, we were much more efficient than them, or we were more efficient, perhaps not much more. Scores per inside 50, 51.1% of the time against AFL average 44.6, and they were 48.4. This is where we did goals per inside 50, was 31.9. Accuracy helps. We kicked only 4 straight in the last, and so that really helped. Goals for inside 50, 31.9 to 24. So against an AFL average of 23. As I mentioned, we're again accurate, which was terrific. Where we could have, I thought, done much more damage is that, again, hit-outs aren't really a helpful number in particular, but we had 22 more hitouts than them. So you'd be wanting to do a little bit more damage from your stoppages than we did. And we had 7 more hitouts to advantage. Finally, our points from defensive half for this match was terrific, 51. As I said, we're top 4 in ball movement since the bye in the last 7 games in the AFL, which really shows the work Goody's done to implement this new method. I think that, whoever does inherit this team will be a long way down the path to having a modern ball movement, high transition game style. They scored 49, so they hurt us the other way against a season average of we're giving up 38. Some notable stats. You mentioned Ed Richards, and this amazing stats. He had a huge game high for clearances, 14, more than double the next player, which is nuts. Contested possessions, he had 17. Score involvements, he had 15 of them. He kicked 2-1. We really needed to put some work into him. He was, in particular, that last quarter. I'm not sure who was on him actually. Who was on him?
Probably no one.
No,
Never man
no
up
one.
these guys.
So in the last quarter, he was huge. He led the clearances. He had 3 clearances. He had 5 score involvements, and he kicked 2 goals, including was he one of the boundary line goals?
Yeah, I think so.
All of which added up to 10 coaches' votes, but even more amazing than that, 32 player rating points. So I mentioned that Maxi had 23.4 or some such for his rating and had a great game. Well, Ed Richards had 32 player rating points, and that's way up in the stratosphere in terms of player rating. You don't get many games with more than that. I'd be guessing, there'd probably be no more than maybe a 10 all season. That would be higher than that would be my guess. But Gorney was impressive in a losing side. He had team highs for contested possessions, 14 of them, which is nuts. Clearances, 5 himself. 23 disposals, which is another factor in his game. He's just racking up disposals this season and 8 score involvements. And just finally, a notable stat, there were 8 lead changes from the 20-minute mark of the third quarter, which made for a very entertaining game of footy.
Yeah, it was. I just wish we would have gone
another loss, 6-point loss. How many 6-point loss and under have we had in the last 3 years?
6 this year. There's a couple last year. It's a bit of a pattern. There's a thread on Demonland about us losing all these close games.
Yeah,
we need to start winning them. So hopefully,
and again, I think it's a completely I think there's a reasonable criticism is that our on-field leaders. You cannot fault Maxi, of course, but where was Track yesterday? Like where was Track doing what I just said about Ed Richards? Ed Richards won them the game of footy. Won them the game. No Ed Richards, they don't win that game. Arguably, you could say the same about Norton. Kicks 5 goals, 1, stands up when it needs to, he needs to stand up. And who stood up for us? Maxi did, of course. He does every single week. But, Rue didn't, Cozzy didn't, Track didn't,
I think anyone who played well didn't play well the whole game.
But also like the X factor kicking the goals against the grain, going back and doing something crazy, So, that's another game where our leaders, were found a little wanting.
Well, while we were talking on the couch, was on the couch, and Buckley, of course, is on the couch, and there is a YouTube video from the segment, but it's 10 minutes long. I won't read it. I did ask the Demonlanders to give me some bullet points. I haven't got it yet. But What said when he posted the video, and the video is entitled, "I'm going to explore it a little bit harder." That's a quote seemingly from Buckley.
From Dora the Explorer.
What said, he wants it clearly, and he's happy to go through the process. So that's one of the comments. Someone else said that who's on the show as well? What's his name? Jordan Lewis said it was basically describing Buckley as the man for the job when he was talking about hard edge. I don't know, having not seen it. And Ted Lasso says, it reminds me of Paul Roos before he took the job, but Bucks's excitement is a little more obvious and he's not as good an actor. I'd be pretty shocked if he wasn't our senior coach next year. So there's a video on Demonland about that.
Yeah, so. I reckon. So there's not going to be anyone else. So that means it's Buckley or none.
Well, so one of the articles in the Herald Sun did mention, and I'll just get to that, that the field has been reduced to Buckley and first-timers like Lions football boss Danny Daly and seniors assistants Hayden Skipworth and Daniel Giansiracusa. So that pool, one of them could be our coach next year.
I think Buckley's already sort of fitting out his office.
Casey, that can't be Buckley, good either.
Like Melbourne may not be, the biggest fish in town, but we are the oldest football club in the world, and that's going to appeal to a.
I know, but we really
player.
we really need.
I mean, all Collingwood players are wannabe Melbourne players, aren't they?
Yeah, maybe Buckley's got some pull with Myercheck. I've heard Collingwood's only offering him a 1-year contract. Would you be happy with him in our forward line? Or do we have too many of that type of player?
Yeah,
Melcham's playing all right. Fridge,
yeah, He takes his chances. He leads up at the ball. He hits it hard. He's smart. Good footy IQ.
Does well against us.
Yeah, I'd have him in a heartbeat.
Well, he could be one that's there. Well, let's get into our listener questions. First one's on to our defence and Jed Adams' debut. Bigfoot writes, I was petrified that our young, inexperienced defence, Sands, May and Lever, would get slaughtered by the Dogs, who have piled on some big scores and thrashed a lot of teams. But I thought that our guys held up pretty well. Was impressed with a couple of things that Adams did and hope that he gets to play in the last few games. But I fear that he'll be the one to go out for May this week. At least he'll get a taste of finals at Casey. Howes as well did a few nice things in the limited game time that he had, and that goal was a ripper under pressure from a decent way out. Buck Naked says, a good effort, especially given the week that was. Thoughts on Adams? Last home game, and we won't lose too many fans with that performance. Monocular says, Adams stood up reasonably in a terrifying baptism of fire with an elite tall forward combo of Norton, Darcy, and cameos from English and occasionally Lob. Radish D says, some good signs in this game. I was thinking most of the week that it had a chance to get very ugly for us. The signs for the future are looking quite good. I'm excited to see what the future holds and the changes that can be made in the team and game style. The defence needs more work. What would you like to see from our defence over the rest of the season to give some optimism for the future? And Strawberry Field says, great pod, guys. I look forward to it every week. It'd be great to hear your thoughts/stats on how our backline functioned yesterday, considering May and Lever out, Adams' debut and the relative youth apart from T-Mac. I thought they gave a good account overall, considering how open the game was and the strength of their talls. Forgotten Old Acquaintance says, do you think we can play Turner and Lever together? Feels like similar roles, but whilst Lever brings leadership attributes, Turner is better one-on-one and quicker. To add to that, where does Petty fit? Should he return to the backline or remain forward where he's been excellent recently? So, B-Man, what are your thoughts on Adams' debut? Excuse me, our defence without May and Lever, and any other comments relating to our backline?
Well, the good news for Jed is that his disposal efficiency was 100%.
How many disposals did he
have? He had 5 disposals. It's like, I'm just looking at his numbers
now. How good was his kick out, by the way?
That was kick that out play, which again did my head into like Chaplin. He's just, look, we're going down the corridor. We're using the corridor so much more. It's so great, isn't it? Look at that. We did exactly the same the previous week against West Coast. The only difference was Bowie who was kicked it out, not Jed Adams.
When I saw Adams take the kick, I was like, what are they doing? Like giving a first gamer the first kick out, or one of the first.
Well, he had 16 pressure acts, which is good going. And look, in terms of, it was a pretty quiet 5 disposals. I can't actually recall. I haven't watched the replay yet. Did he spend any time on Norton? I mean, it did.
I did see him. I can't remember who took
5 goals. So their key forward kicked
they
5
all
goals.
Moved around. They all got a taste of him.
Speaking of their forwards, talk about an embarrassment of Richards. Sorry, that was an unintentional pun. An embarrassment of riches, as my mate said at the footy yesterday. How good are they going for forwards? They've got the number 1 draft pick sitting around, who maybe he comes back next year or maybe doesn't, but Darcy, Norton and Ugle-Hagan. So that's not bad combo. Maybe but I thought Adams was okay. I'm glad that they really pleased that they gave him a run. I hate the idea of him coming out, but, if May comes back in. To answer the question about how our defence was, I actually think our back 7 did a terrific job to not allow them to open us up. As I said, those transition numbers are off the charts, and so ours were actually pretty good, but theirs were way better. And so I think the back 7, particularly the tall players, they were not helped one little bit by our inability to structure up around the ground and stop them moving the ball so quickly. And so that was definitely an issue for them. I love Tommy Mack. He makes good decisions, doesn't he? And he's going to be top 5 in the Bluey, or at least top 10. So he was awesome.
Do you think, and we've discussed this because we know that he wasn't, we're quite certain he wasn't in the frame to be playing this year, and he's done a stellar job. We've had injuries to May and Lever all year at various times, and he's come in and he then got unceremoniously dumped, even though he was one of our best backmen during that time. Do you think they're going to give him another contract next year?
I hope they do, and I hope I get the opportunity to see that particular employee. I wonder if he'll still be around.
You might not.
I want to say, look, took a long time for you finally to get him out of the side, and you made a mistake there, and he's been one of the best players in the side since he's come back in. It was great to see Howes kick his goal. I thought that was terrific.
A beautiful kick.
It was a beautiful kick. And did you notice too, he did something that I'm just amazed more players don't. He can clearly kick 50 metres. Why do so many players get so close to the man on the mark? He didn't do that.
All around the ground we do that.
He kicked it from 10 metres back behind the mark, which but why not? Why had to be any risk? I think Petty should go back. I think Petty's a better defender, and he's an obvious...
Maybe a new coach, Bucks, if you're listening.
Well, obvious succession to Lever and May, and, May, his back has never been right for the last couple of years, so it depends a little bit on his mobility, but I think Petty's a better defender than Ford, and that's where getting a player like Myercheck might be worth considering.
He took some great marks, Petty. My one knock on Petty is body work one-on-one.
But he also seems to want to go to the body every single time, from when the ball's in the flight.
He can take a mark if he gets in front, and he's got a fantastic set of hands.
So I'd like to see him play defence. To be honest,
Red and Blue Beard says some good signs, but same old result in a close game. When will we win one of these? Wells 11 says 6 close losses this year. I was super proud of the team yesterday and can see the bright possibilities, but close losses is definitely now a habit. It has been since losing 2 close finals in 23. In my opinion, we get so close because we're still such a great contested side with some very exciting young talent emerging now also. We lose because we consistently have too many goal-costing brain fades across a game. At least we didn't lose yesterday because we kicked badly for goal. So there's that. But any clues as to how we turn this heartbreaking habit of losing close games around? Buckneckett says, I counted 4 significant errors that cost us goals unnecessarily. You take those out of our game and we win this. For which Wells 11 provided some examples. He said Turner in a horrible turnover after a great mark led to a direct goal. Rivers turned it over with a short kick coming out of defence straight to a Bulldog leading directly to a goal. Langford fluffs his kick to a wide open Melksham in the square and ball goes out of bounds. And that's 3. There may be more. I can't remember the Doggies doing the same that led directly to goals, but being honest, the Doggies also hit the post 6 times. They did, actually, so we were lucky there. Spirit of Norm Smith says, another close loss. That's 6 this year where the D's were right in the contest but couldn't get the win. What's the issue? The on-field leadership, decision-making, goal-kicking, strategy, all are shown to be lacking at the crunch. So, B-Man, we've talked a little bit about this and why we can't win the close ones, and it just doesn't get easier to swallow. There could be leadership, on-field.
I think those polish. Forget who mentioned it, but the on-field leadership, decision-making, goal-kicking strategy, I think they're all in there. I'm not sure about strategy as such, although it was, of course, in the Saints game, I think, arguably. But, I think definitely our kicking skills have been a major issue. If you think about some of our heartbreaking losses, they've been on the back of our inaccuracy. We've put ourselves in positions where we've lost games which we shouldn't have because of inaccuracy. Some specific examples like Viney not clearing Wiedemann, I think it was, wasn't it, in that Blues fight in the set 23 semi. Those sorts of examples in that same play. Was it Judd who bodied instead of went to ground instead of marking? So, but I think they're all factors. Kicking skills, I would say, is the biggest factor. But having said all of that, what's the point? I'll go back to Darren Shand. Part of the review last year was that we acknowledged that there's definitely a problem. There's a I would say psychology is the most likely sort of, if Occam's razor is applied to it, I think kicking skills is probably the number one factor. Under pressure, you're going to make more mistakes if you've not got a good technique. However, I would say beyond that, the obvious Occam's razor answer is psychology. We've bottled it. And that's what something like, what do they call? Are they leading teams or whatever? Darren Shand's outfit. That was I assume that's what they were brought in to fix up. So if you're going to pay someone to do that, it's reasonable to say, well, how come we haven't improved in that area at all this season? That's 6 games where we've bottled it, basically. Well, no, we didn't really in this game, except we didn't,
when you mentioned the word psychologist, I just recall speaking to a player at a function, I won't mention the player's name, about psychologists. There was a period where we had some bad kicking. It could have been any period this year, really. Bad kicking for goal. And I'm sort of in a group of people who mentioned a psychologist, and this player said sometimes when you've got a psychologist telling you stuff, it sort of gets into your head and it makes it worse. It makes the situation worse. So, because I was always big on get them a psychologist. They need to get them a hypnotist, maybe.
Right. Well, I might be
tapes while they go to bed.
I might be rewriting history, and I'm all aboard the Buckley train, it sounds like. But I've got this vague memory, and I think this is right at least, that Buckley, under Collingwood, Collingwood lost a whole bunch of close games. But then under McRae, they flipped it on its head with much the same sides, and they prattle on about it all the time, the commentators. It's gone off of boil a bit this year. It's not been true this year. But for 2 years, they had some crazy record of won 9 games out of 10 or 11 out of 12.
No, well, they've won under him, they've won 20 or something in close games. But I think a lot of them that year where it was happening all the time, it was because they were coming from behind. And they ran over the top of teams or just, sort of.
Well, they had
whatever.
the belief.
But it wasn't.
They had the belief, didn't they? And I think that's
we're
what
sort
we
of
had
being in
21.
front and losing games,
but also being super fit. And
yes.
so I think that's another big factor in I'd add to the list, in fact, is our fitness. And so the fitter you are, in 21, we were running over teams. If we got a sniff in the last quarter, they knew that they were going to be fitter. They knew they were going to run over teams. And I think that builds its own psychological momentum. And I think McRae that's leveraged off that as well. And that's so, I think that the fitness is, again, I would argue it's our biggest issue. But I think that's definitely a factor. And if it is Buckley can get them super fit and that high performance program's ticking over, then I think we'll see a big improvement in our ability to finish off games and win those close ones, because there's no doubt the psychology is connected to that sense of being invincible. And Collingwood almost had it. They had that for a period of time that year. It was like the opposition started believing it. You could see it. Yeah. And so I think that it gives its own momentum. So I think that thing can be turned around fairly quickly, because psychology plays a massive part in that.
Just talking about 21 and running all over teams, I've got a hot tip. I reckon Adelaide and our mate Burgess is going to prime that team, and they're going to run over teams in that final series. So,
well, Andy, you've cut my lunch, because I was going to say exactly the same. I was really hoping that West Coast had beat them, and then I wanted to back the Crows after that, because they were clearly this is exactly the pattern Burgess did. No one's telling me otherwise, that they weren't loaded and exhausted in that game. I watched that game and they were running up and down on the spot, and they got out of it with a win. But you watch, it's all about peaking in finals, and I reckon they're going to win the flag. And and on the back of that fitness.
Buck Neckard says, great set play early from the kick out. Why do we only see it once? Referring to what we're talking about before with
twice.
Jed Adams.
Once in that game.
Once in that. Why did we only see it once in that game? Yes.
Because we did see it the previous week.
Yeah. Lazy says, this was the first game this year where we looked completely committed to the game plan. While the skill errors and lack of discipline were still there, we always looked for a runner out of the back line and looked to bring it back inboard through the middle. There rarely seemed a moment where the players looked confused or caught in two minds about what to do, and if mistakes occurred, they would try it again. I don't know if this was just a coincidence, but there is just a little sadness that it took until now for the guys to have the confidence in this. Was Goodwin onto something? Monocular says, I generally dislike the talk of noble loss, but this week I would tend to agree. Some very good ball movement chains, which we haven't seen much this season, and more links through the corridor by both teams, which made it a good game to watch, but still finally broken too often by poor finishing skills. Tweak that up over the off-season and by draft/trade. I am optimistic about 2026. Very solid effort by the team. Harvey Wallbanger says, I wanted to follow up on these comments, more of a comment than a question, re the stats. We had pretty amazing transition numbers this week, which goes to the new game plan. Just as well that clicked yesterday because we were smashed in clearances, -15, and inside 50s, -15. Normally that would lead to a bigger loss than that. Amazing pressure in the third quarter drove the resurgence after halftime. I get the experiment with Windsor in the middle, but Richards and Libba killed us inside. We needed Jack's game from last week this week. Dark Horse 72 says the players seem to have more freedom to run an attack. It brought different players into the game. I also like the presser by Chaplin. He's smart as he knows caretakers don't end up long-term coaches, and he spoke really well. Nice to hear a different voice. Maybe Goodwin should have mixed it up with different coaches presenting at different times. How much of a difference to meeting to game plan was the new mix of players and their positioning on the field? From my KO broadcast, there seemed to be some notable changes in where players were positioned / started, providing a fast movement and better targets forward. On the flip side, skills still not good enough by even our best skilled players. Hellfire Dub says, although I was annoyed about the result with our midfield playing poorly and Windsor getting injured is a pain, there were definitely positives yesterday. I thought we looked different and better without Goodwin. Please don't use the Eagles game as a comparison because I was there and they look like a young VFL side. Players yesterday were actually leading and getting rewarded, taking marks or grabbing the crumbs. Goal kicking was sharper. The second half was genuinely exciting and we looked competitive. Changes were being made on the fly. Young lads like Cully and Adams showed they might be decent players. The standout difference was how enjoyable the game was as a spectacle. The fans were getting into it and we came close to winning the game. There were smiles on the players' faces and they restored a bit of pride in the jumper. It all felt like a step in the right direction and a relief from the constrained, overwrought defence first-minded of Goodwin. I'm excited about the prospect of us playing positive football under what I hope will be a competent new coach that rejuvenates the team. So, B-Man, was there anything in our game style that was different than under Goody that you noticed? And also, if there's anything specific from any of the other questions or comments that you want to elaborate on.
Just give me a spell. Like, that's exactly what I mean about rewriting history. It's just a load of old
Everyone
tosh.
sees it differently. Everyone sees it differently.
Like, see it differently. It's just, it's not about seeing it differently. It's like, there's facts. And the facts are that the game statistically was almost a mirror of the game last week and the previous game. As I said, from the bye, we've the top 4 team in ball movement in the AFL. The last 7 games of the season, we've averaged 92 points. 92 points. This is not suddenly wake up in the morning and Chaplin goes, oh, boys, it's time to attack. Goody's defence first style. It's just like, come on. It's like there's confirmation bias and there's that sort of stuff. Like from, a lot of that stuff, those questions is confirmation bias on steroids because both the eye test and the data doesn't support it. It simply doesn't support it. We scored 51 points from our defensive half. They killed us on transition. That was part of the problem. It was no more an attacking game than, well, certainly not last week. Last week we scored 10 goals in a quarter and had our highest score. Yes, it was against West Coast. West Coast, admittedly against a team I think was loading, ran the top of the table. A team top of the table close and almost won that game. Okay, we scored our highest score in our 7 of our last 8 quarters. You take out the scoreless quarter in the game against Saints. That's been the trend. So this isn't like some new thing. This has been, the game was entertaining, but to be perfectly honest, the Dogs should have destroyed us in the first half. Should have been well and truly. The thing that I was most impressed at, actually, was the fact that we kept in the game. And there was, at the beginning of the third quarter, I'm not sure what you felt like. It felt like to me, oh, here we go. We're gone here.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah, and then so I thought our fight back in the third and our fight back in the last, knocked us for our leadership. But I thought that effort was terrific. But just the way game plan wise and method wise, there was barely any difference. There was a couple more going through the corridor, but what I will say is hardly any teams are going through the corridor. None of the top teams are using the corridor at the moment. I don't know. I said that 2 or 3 weeks ago because it's too low percentage. That'd be one of the reasons why the Dogs, I'd be concerned if I was a Dogs fan. They were just too easy to score against. I mean, we look at our forward line. It was barely functioning and we nearly scored 100 points against them. The way we played yesterday was barely any different to the way way Goodwin's been having the game being played, particularly since the bye. As I said, we've averaged 92 points since the bye, and that wasn't because we scored 350 points yesterday. So it's just that's what I was saying at the top of the show about Goodwin, is that I just really hope that D-Span don't fall into the trap of rewriting history, and then there'll be another set of myths that will grow up, Goodwin myths, #Goodwin myths, that, a defence first, give the guy some credit where it's due. He has worked his tail off this year to implement a new method, and he has successfully done so. The problem is we've got too many ball butchers for the method. So again, 60-odd points that we give up on turnover, we're given way too many points up on turnover, and, Goodwin, that's been the theme every single week, and that's because we're playing a high transition game. You don't give any points on turnover if you're not bothering to transition the ball. You just don't. So the two, it's going to drive me spare until the end of the season, and hopefully not next season.
Well, as the official power broker of the MFC, I'm just giving Brad Green a call, and I'm going to ask him to bring Goody back.
Well,
can you say, sorry, I made a mistake? Can we have you back? It's like going back to an ex-girlfriend and,
after getting him sacked, Andy. I can't believe you give him this warm tribute after getting him sacked.
Don't you dare. I can give him a tribute. I just said we needed a new voice. I wasn't getting the knives out.
Then called up Greeny and said, Greeny, that's it. I'm out of here. Demonland's off air if you don't get rid of that Goodwin fella. I want to know, is Chaplin the right
is Chaplin the right guy?
Right, is Chaplin the right guy?
I actually really like Chaplin.
I've got a lot of time for him too. But it was an entertaining game yesterday, partly because it was free-flowing. Dogs aren't going to make it anywhere. They're not like Adelaide. They're just too easy to open up, and really were pretty average in parts yesterday.
Lefty writes, I'm loath to blame any loss on the umpires, but geez, they were terrible yesterday. They missed blatant throws from the Bulldogs, a deliberate out of bounds in our forward line where the Bulldogs player made a try over the boundary line that would have been the envy of any rugby player, and so many incorrect disposal non-decisions. Anyways, it was a much better effort from the Ds. Well, this is my favourite topic of all, the umpiring. I don't like blaming losses on umpires because there are plenty of errors in our own game that contributed to the result. That said, poor umpiring certainly doesn't help. I think the numbers evened out late. They finished ahead 16-13, but I always say that it's the ones that you don't get that sting the most, especially when the opposition get those same free kicks. Blatant throws. There were a couple of them run right in front of me. I think Bontempelli just one-handed, right. The umpire was right there, could not have not seen it.
We only got to half-time. I could not believe it. We had 5 free kicks at half-time. Like in half of footy, we only got 5 free kicks, and then as you said,
just before then it was 3. We got some too late, I think, that from 3 to 5.
Yeah. Don't get me started.
But yeah, it's frustrating. Master Chief says, I spoke about this last week, but I'm going to keep saying it. Max Gawn absolutely deserves his 8th All-Australian jacket. He's been one of our few constants this season, consistently delivering elite performances and dominating opponents across the ground. He racked up 23 disposals, 14 contested, 5 marks, 3 of which are contested, 42 hitouts, 8 score involvements, and even slotted another beautiful snap goal. He likes that snap goal, big man. I just hope selectors of the All-Australian selectors don't fall into the traps of recency bias and let a shirt burst of form from Grundy outweigh Max's sustained brilliance across the whole year. I will wholeheartedly agree. I'd be livid if Max isn't in the All-Australian team, and that's all I have to say on the matter.
Make him captain.
And
in your discussions with him about the next coach, have you talked to him about the All-Australian?
I haven't spoken to him about the coach. Look, Gordy would have been, I haven't spoken to him, but I'm sure he would have been livid. I mean, he's good mates.
You protested too much.
He was good. I thought he performed well the next day on the radio. He towed the club line because he had to, but I'm sure that wasn't necessarily what his opinion might have been. We know a lot of players do love Goody, and the players were very fond of him, but Max did what he had to do. He's always front of the
that's
club first.
all part of the package, isn't it? He's just an awesome leader of the footy club, a legend. And as I said, I love the fact that he's still improving. His overhead marking and contested marking has gone to another level. It's just a joy to watch.
Yeah. I could see Tim English was so frustrated some of the times.
Tim English got thrashed by him.
Yeah.
7.7 was his player rating.
Yeah. Yeah.
So English was given a lesson.
Well, that's the end of our questions. So let's get into the Casey game. I've got a bit of a thing here. Did you see the game?
I did watch it, yeah.
All right, so I'll just go through this thing. In one of the most dramatic finishes of the 2025 VFL season, the Casey Demons overcame a mid-match collapse and wet Queensland conditions to snatch a 4-point victory over the Brisbane Lions at Brighton Homes Arena. The results keeps their final hopes alive, lifting them into 8th place with one home and away round remaining. Casey burst out of the blocks in the opening term, playing some of their cleanest and most high-pressure football of the season, led by the composure and class of Charlie Spargo and Jack Billings, the creativity of Bailey Laurie, and the promising energy of youngsters Kynan Brown and Colton Tolstrup. The Demons swarmed the contest and moved the ball with speed. Multiple forwards hit the scoreboard early, while Laurie produced the highlight of the quarter, a dazzling sidestep past 2 lines before nailing a superb shot from 45 metres. By late in the first term, Casey had surged to a 27-point lead. But just as quickly as the lead was built, it evaporated. A light sprinkling of rain turned the contest, halting Casey's momentum and sparking a Brisbane onslaught. In less than 20 minutes, either side of a quarter time, the Lions piled on 6 unanswered goals to flip the game and head into the second quarter with an 11-point lead. The sudden shift had echoes of Melbourne's loss to St Kilda a few weeks earlier. Casey needed a circuit breaker, and it came through the strong marking from Tom Fullerton at centre-half back and the steady defensive work of Tom Freeman and Wardle Lau. Goals to Aidan Johnson and Luca Kempfield restored the lead, only for Brisbane to snatch it back with an after the siren major at half-time. The third term became an arm wrestle. Scores were locked at the final change, with neither side able to find any real fluency in the so-called premiership quarter. The stalemate was broken midway through the last term when 2 quick Brisbane goals put the home side 9 points clear, a potentially decisive buffer in the slippery conditions. But Casey weren't done. Johnson struck again to narrow the gap before Billings missed a gettable chance. Then, with the clock ticking past 32 minutes, Riley Bonner drove the ball deep inside 50. Jefferson gathered cleanly, fed to Johnson, who spotted Mitch Hardy alone in space. Hardy coolly rolled the ball through to give Casey a 5-point lead. There was one final scare with the siren sounding. Brisbane earned a free kick just 15 metres out on a slight angle. A goal would have stolen the win, but the shot sailed wide, sealing Casey's 4th consecutive victory and one of their most memorable of the year. Kempfield was the star up forward, kicking a goal in every quarter to finish with 4 for the match. After missing the pre-season due to serious illness, his emergence alongside Matt Jefferson gives Melbourne's next senior coach exciting forward liner options for the future. Laurie was again lively with 20 disposals and 4 tackles, while Brown 22 disposals, 4 tackles, Tolstrup 21 and 6 tackles, and Taj Woden 21 and 6 marks showed their value in the midfield battle. Billings amassed 21 disposals, took 14 marks and kicked a goal, continuing his strong run of form. Down back, Fullerton 10 intercept possessions and Freeman 10 intercepts were rocks in defence, repelling countless Brisbane forays. Bonner was Casey's top ball winner with 29 touches, while Tom Campbell and Will Varell fought hard in the ruck against former Casey big man Oscar McInerney. The win not only showcased Casey's resilience under pressure, but also highlighted the blend of experienced heads and emerging talent that could prove crucial in the weeks ahead. They now face a huge challenge in their final home and away clash against ladder leaders Box Hill, a true test of their finals credentials. Haven't really looked at the ladder. Are we in danger of not making the fight? Do we need to win this last game? I know there's wild card games, but what's the...
I don't know, actually. I haven't looked at the ladder either.
Well, it said we're eighth.
Where is that game? Is it Casey or is it Box Hill?
Does not say in my thing, but I will have a look while you make some commentary.
It was a really entertaining game of footy. I really enjoyed it. It would have been a heartbreaking loss. It was a heartbreaking loss for Brisbane. It wasn't much of an angle. It was very well. We'd scored with. Did you watch it?
No. I saw the last goal on the highlights thing. But
we goaled, and I'm just trying to remember who kicked it. We got I think it was it Kentfield? Got a Joe the Goose and ran into an open goal. And that was with all of about kind of been much more than a minute left on the clock. And then Dersma, who looks a likely type, who I think is he locked up already in father son or anyway?
All the other Dersmas are at other clubs, so
there's Dersmas all over the joint. He got tackled on the half-forward flank and took on a player and got tackled, and then he gave up the free kick at the end as well. I think for dragging it in, it would have been after a very impressive performance, it would have been a pretty woeful way for him to finish that match, essentially costing us the game. But fortunately, they missed. It was really exciting. There's a couple of things to really like. I don't think Jefferson had huge numbers. Did you read his numbers out before?
No, I didn't read numbers. I just.
I don't think he had huge numbers, and he wasn't particularly sort of influential. But what I really liked about it was the sort of aggression he had at the ball, and the speed at the contest. He was, a number of times really worked hard to sort of attack the ball. So as much as he wasn't super, he didn't have a dominant game by any stretch. I really, really liked the way he went about, just his energy. I thought his energy was just first class. The other one that two players that really impressed were Fullerton. We might have found something back there in defence. He was terrific and made really smart decisions. His kicking was really neat, I thought. He was, I really... I thought his game was, in fact, arguably he was the difference. We were really struggling for height down back. I'm just looking at where his numbers.
The Casey game. Is it Casey on Saturday? I want to say.
And the other one, he didn't have as big a game as he'd had. He only had the 8 kicks, and just looking here, but he kicked 4 goals from his 8 kicks. Is Luca Kenterfield, as they kept calling him on the call, but Luca Kentfield, or it could be Luke Kenterfield.
It's Kentfield.
Yeah, it's Kentfield. He was terrific, kicked 4 goals, took his chances, only had the 8 kicks, but 4 of which were goals.
That's all right.
And
I've always said if you're low possessions and you're forward and you kick goals, that's all right.
That's right. And he took another really big pack mark, and he's got really sticky hands, and he's got a fairly decent aggro about him. And so he really gets... he gets fired up. There was a pretty spirited wrestle at one stage. He got barreled over after he got the Joe the Goose, and it looked like it was going to be on for young and old. And he's got, full preseason, because keep in mind he had pneumonia.
He was sick.
Basically do a preseason.
No.
I think he could be definitely one to watch. Charlie Spargo was super influential. He was the fantasy points. He had our second most, 105, and Jack Billings 112. He was quiet in the second half, but arguably set the game up in the first half. Really neat kicks inside 50. I think he had 5 inside 50 kicks before half time, I think, from memory. So he was impressive, and Colt was solid in the first half as well. Taj's best game for a little while. The other player, I'm not sure what his status is, George would know, but Wardell Lual, who's a defender, he's moves pretty well. And but the standout for me was Fullerton, actually, and probably Spargs in that first half at least. But I really liked Fullerton's game, and wouldn't it be great to him turn around? He's probably on the chopping block if he doesn't find it. But it's really important that Casey kick on and make finals, and it can be really important for a number of those young players and the club in general. I think with if we have a decent start to the AFLW season, we go deep into the VFL season. That all fit that whole club vibe. I think that those things are important.
The game is on Sunday at 1:05 at Casey Fields, and they are currently 8th on the ladder with quite a healthy percentage, and it looks like they're a game and a half. They will play wildcard finals at least, so they are alive even if they lose against the top team. So.
It's good.
Casey stands, so they will make the wild card at least, and that's at least still alive. So, Well, let's go into changes. Caleb Windsor appears to be the only casualty from this week's match. He will look like he pulled a hammy and will likely miss the remainder of the season. That will open the door for Xavier Lindsay, who I didn't hear his name mentioned there, so assumed he was a holdover for
he was
the
genuinely
seniors.
rested.
So he will return to the side, you would think, to make up for Windsor. Stephen May should return from his 3-match suspension this week. So the question, big man, who comes in, who comes out? Will Jed Adams be given another look, or will he make way for Stephen May as the D's take on the Hawks?
I actually think it's interesting. I think they'll want Jed Adams as probably back at Casey because, against their, I don't know who's in the Casey's, in Box Hill's forward line, but I'm guessing that they'll put a few eggs in the Casey basket now, and it makes sense, doesn't it?
It sounds like Tom Fullerton played defence because Jed Adams was out, and we've got.
Well, he's played defence the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, he has. Okay.
Yeah, he has, and
well, I guess with Kentfield playing well forward,
basically they swapped. Kentfield was back, and I think it's even been the last 4 or 5 weeks, and they basically swapped positions. So I suspect you're right. Jed Adams will go back, and May will come in, and that makes sense. I think they'd be keen to get Spargo in the side, in large part because of his kicking inside 50. It's a real pity for Windsor to do his hammy because I don't think he was starring, but the more time he can get in the middle, I think that's important for him. It will be interesting because that gives them an opportunity to. Well, I guess they're not going to. There's probably no one else really banging the door down, but it's a pity because Ricky Mentha didn't have a game that says for Casey that said pick me. So. But it's interesting. I don't know whether Lindsay looked cooked when he finished up and didn't play. So, but yeah, you're probably right in the sense that he's the logical one, just almost like for like, isn't it? That he comes in for Windsor and see where you go from there. So, yeah, maybe only 2 changes. Adams out for May and Lindsay in for Windsor.
All right, so the D's return to the G as the away side this week to take on the Hawks, who still need to win their remaining 2 games to ensure a final spot in September. Can the Demons play the role of party pooper and rain on the Hawks parade? Man, can we do it?
Well, I said last week that I thought we'd be super competitive against the Dogs, and I thought we had a really good chance of winning. I proved to be correct, and I don't think it was about the interregnum bounce for the sack coach bounce. And I feel the same way this week. I think that the Hawks very similar in some respects to Dogs in the sense that they love to rebound and move the ball quickly from the back half, and they love to do it by hands. They're 4th in the AFL for handballs per game, 4th in disposals. They use a lot at the width of the ground, and they'll really look to do that at the G. Interestingly, they're 3rd in hit-outs per game, but they're 12th in clearances per game. So number of hit-outs doesn't necessarily equate to your clearance domination. And in fact, there was a reverse of that in the game just gone on the weekend. Is English couldn't get a hit out, yet they're the best, and is not a brilliant tap ruckman particularly. Well, it certainly has been this year, and they're the best clearance side in the AFL, the Dogs. So it's a little bit of a, it's not on Maxi and his ability to hit it to a spot. So they love that run and handball. And if you remember last time we played them, we did a great job tactically. The 5th in uncontested possessions per game, which speaks to that spread. 4th in effective disposal games, they're a good kicking side, and 5th in contested marks, which is important. 3rd in marks inside 50. But if you remember that game earlier in the season when we played really well against them, what we did really well in that game was to allow them that first handball and then really sweat on the second handball to stop that ability to spread from the contest. And that worked really well in that game. And it'll be interesting to see whether Chaplin employs a similar strategy and really sweat on their ability to get it out to the outside runners and lock it up. A fair bit will depend, as it is, on our pressure. I recall, I think I skipped over our pressure in the. I didn't mention our pressure in the stats file. It was actually not great in the match. It was really only the one quarter where we had, really decent pressure, which was the third quarter, was 190 from memory, something like that. So if we bring our pressure for the entire game, I think we've got, the chance of beating anyone except maybe the top 4 sides. I think there's a real drop-off, to be honest. I agree. I think Crows are my tip for the flag. I think I'd love to break the Hawks' heart. I hate them. And, for years and years and years, they beat up on us. I've got years and years and years of wanting us to win before that period of time is washed away, if ever. And I would love it. I'd love it if we come out and really bring it to them. We need to do a better job than of starting faster than we did in this match just gone. We easily could have been blown away, I thought, a couple of different times in the first half against the Doggies. I think we've got a legitimate chance if we can stop them on the spread. We have to sort out our all-team defence a little bit. And, key again, they're a really good kicking side. We're a really average kicking side, and it really shows up in the turnovers. If we can clean up our turnover, personally, I would make a few team rules. I wouldn't allow Rivers to kick anything under the 60 metres. I wouldn't allow Track to kick anything under 60 metres. I wouldn't allow Gawn to kick anything under 60 metres, and just flat out ban those players from short kicks. Possible, I know, but it hurts us so much every week turning the ball over.
Well, it might be a good thing if we lose to Hawthorn, because next week we play Collingwood. Now, Collingwood, if they lose to Adelaide and Melbourne, so we beat Collingwood next week and Adelaide beat them this week.
So we beat Brisbane next week.
If Brisbane just need to defeat one of Fremantle or Hawthorn in their 2 remaining games, Geelong defeat one of Essendon, they've beaten Essendon, defeat Sydney or Richmond. Hawthorn defeats both Melbourne, us this week, and then Brisbane the next week. Fremantle defeat... Well, they've got to win 2, so they've got to beat. They defeat 2 of, and they've won one of them, so they just need to win against Brisbane or Western Bulldogs. And Gold Coast defeat. They've won against Carlton, so they just need to win one more out of GWS, Port, or Essendon, and then GWS defeat both Gold Coast and St Kilda, and Western Bulldogs defeat West Coast and Fremantle. Then Collingwood miss out of the finals.
I got everything up to...
anyway,
beat Hawthorn.
So. We've got to lose to Hawthorn this week, beat Collingwood, and then there's a pathway. Mind you, a lot of things have to happen, but they all can happen. It's not like North Melbourne to defeat someone or West Coast to beat someone. These top 8 teams just having to beat other top 8-ish teams or thereabouts or weaker teams. So there is a pathway for Collingwood to go, but we have to lose this week. So we're going to take one for the team this week. I don't want to
lose this week. And just to say on the Hawks it's really interesting. That's becoming a phenomena of teams on top of the ladder at the halfway point of the season, not being able to see out the season. And I'm positive it's partly to do.
You called it. You called it at that time as well.
Yeah, that's the pattern that seems to happen. And conversely, I said a few weeks ago to a friend while I was in Cambodia, country dropping there, that asked about Hawthorn. I said, I suspect that they're winding up exactly like they did last year and coming home with a rush, and they're looking fitter and fitter. And so they'll really look to run us and exploit our lack of fitness, and could give us a touch-up if we do allow it to get on the outside. But I think they're coming home with a bit of a wet sail, and the Pies are exactly the opposite. They're coming home with whatever the opposite to a dry sail.
Well, that's where we're going to leave it for tonight. We'll be back next week to break down our round 23 match against the Hawks. Always,
Andy, will you be announcing the new coach next week?
Well, according to everything I've read, they're saying about preliminary final week is the time. So,
well, can you speak to your sources and get that moved ahead? I want to know by.
I want them to just announce it now.
Yeah,
to get this panel.
Yeah,
just give Bucks what he wants.
Yeah.
If he, why muck around?
Yeah.
Let's just get it moving. He can get in the coaching box.
A couple of tight polos and Bob's your uncle.
He can coach the last 2 games if he wants.
Yeah. That'd be the shortest coaching chaplain would have 1 week.
Can you actually can you do that? You can't bring someone in, can you? I'm not saying that's going to happen or asking, but I'm asking, can you do that?
Well, I guess so. You could do anything.
Okay, Bucks, come on.
Yeah.
All right. As always, your questions and comments are an integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted their questions and comments. Thank you to Singer, Monocular, Spirited Norm Smith, Murdoch, 516, Dark Horse 72, Bigfoot, Buck Naked, Radish D, Strawberry Fields, Forgotten, Old Acquaintance, Red and Blue Beard, Wells 11, Lazy, Harvey Wallbanger, Hellfire Dub, Lefty, Master Chief, and then a couple who submitted some comments and stuff around El Diablo 14, Doomsday D, D's 1911, Doug Reamer, Clintosaurus, and Never Odd or Even. Thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you to my co-host, Bidman, and thank you to you, our loyal listeners who listen to us every week, even in the bad times. So don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll read it out and give you a shout-out on the next show. Let's go, Demons.
Go Red Leggers.
Come on, demons.